Hello, guys. I would like to present to your attention the article that I read by Michael Sellers, who is a former CIA Russia specialist, and he's talking about these claims that from former KGB officer that Trump was recruited by Soviet intelligence in the end of in 1990s, was given the code name Krasnov, and he was working for Russia ever since. So let's have a look at this article. Okay, here you can see Trump, and he is shaking hands with Gorbachev. I think it is not really good picture, but I think it is Gorbachev, and you can make out this birthmark on his forehead, with very famous special feature. Okay. The anti-Trump internet has been ablaze for a couple of days about claims by a former KGB officer that Donald Trump was recruited by the KGB in 1980s and given the code name Krasnov. Curiously, sites like Yahoo and Daily Beast ran the story, then took it down. Others have left it up. I've gone back to the original source, a Russian language Facebook post, and have taken a hard look at the whole thing. As many of you know, I'm a former CIA Russia specialist who served in Moscow right about the time Trump first visited. Here's what I make of this. The allegations. The recent claims originate from Alnur Musayev, a former high-ranking Soviet and Kazakh intelligence official. In a Facebook post dated February 20, so it is recent because I'm filming this on February 25, only 5 days later of this year, February 20 of this year, Musayev alleged that during his tenure in the 6th Directorate of the USSR's KGB in 1987, Donald Trump, then a 40-year-old American businessman, was recruited under the code name Krasnov. This directorate specialized in recruiting businessmen from capitalist countries. Musayev further claims that Trump's personal file is currently managed by a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Assessing the credibility of the claim. Alnur Musayev is a credible individual. His career, biography, and everything available about him suggests that his claims should not be dismissed outright. Musayev served in high-level intelligence roles in both the Soviet KGB and later in Kazakhstan National Security Committee, and I think he was either the head of this committee or deputy head, so really high-ranking guy there. A key question is, do the claim track with the other information that is known already? It is well documented that Donald Trump visited Moscow in 1987 at the invitation of Soviet government. I mean, they invited him for some reason. I don't know what was the reason given by Trump, or when I think that he was asked why he was visiting Moscow in 1987. I think when he went there and when he came back, he had to say why he was traveling there. But when they invited him, they probably had some plans for him, and not. I don't think that in 1987 it was some kind of a direct investment into Moscow or into Soviet Union economy. I think it was. I don't think that it was possible for Soviet government to grant him possibility to, for example, to build some hotel or other real estate property and have. And I mean, it was not possible to build it and to be an owner of this, because nothing could be owned by individual or private company, not and be not part of Soviet government. It was not possible at 1987. Trump, okay, it is equally well documented that the KGB at that time had a mandate to identify, assess, and potentially recruit prominent Western businessmen who visited the Soviet Union. Trump, given his status as an ambitious, media-savvy real estate mogul with international interests, would certainly have been considered a valid target. It is almost inconceivable that Trump could have made a trip of that nature without coming into direct or indirect contact with KGB personnel. Even if he was unaware of it, his Soviet host would have included intelligence officers, his interest guides would have been KGB connected, and his interactions would have been observed and analyzed. Additionally, Trump's marriage to a Czech model Ivana Trump, nee Zelnichkova, in 1977 would almost certainly have put him on the radar of the Czech intelligence service, which worked closely with the KGB. The claim is, I think, credible claim that they were following Donald Trump through Ivana Trump, and their informant was her father, who was made to work with them because, I mean, he was left in Czechoslovakia. What other option he had other than, to inform them about some business activities that Trump was involved in, or some other information that he could obtain from his daughter. Otherwise, they could make life very, very uncomfortable for this guy. So I don't think that he had a choice. He was informing on his son-in-law through the information that he obtained from his daughter. Previous reporting has confirmed that STB maintained a file on Trump, with records indicated then monitored him through his wife's connections, meaning through her father. This further supports the notion that he would have been a known entity to Eastern Bloc intelligence services by the time of his Moscow visit. So they already were following him for at least 10 years, because they were Czechoslovakia intelligence service, they were following his wife even before she married him, because she went to Austria, then to Canada, and then to United States. So she went to the Western countries several years before she married Trump. She was a model, and she was doing modeling business she was modeling in Western countries. Taken in aggregate, these factors lead to the conclusion that Musayev's claims are at least plausible. His credibility, the KGB known interest in recruiting Western businessmen, Trump's exposure to Soviet intelligence, and his pre-existing ties to the Eastern Bloc all suggest that a recruitment attempt could have taken place. Whether it was successful remains an open question. What does recruitment mean? It is important to clarify what recruitment would have meant in this context. The KGB goal was to cultivate Western influences, including politicians, businessmen, journalists, not necessarily as paid controlled agents, but as willing or semi-witting collaborators. Trump, if recruited, would not necessarily have been a formal asset engaged in espionage. More likely, the KGB would have sought to develop a relationship in which he saw personal or financial advantages in cooperating with Soviet interests. Many Western businessmen who traveled to the USSR were approached by the KGB. Some were simply asked for benign cooperation, such as providing assessment of business climates, sharing industry gossips, or introducing useful contacts. Others were encouraged to maintain long-term relationships that could evolve over time. On the US side, the CIA regularly debriefed businessmen who traveled to the Soviet Union, and many reported overtures from Soviet intelligence. One piece of collateral evidence often cited in this discussion is that shortly after Trump returned from the USSR, he took out full-page ads in major US newspapers criticizing American foreign policy. While they claim that these were anti-NATO ads is an oversimplification, they did represent a striking shift in his rhetoric. Trump spent nearly $100,000 on these ads, which argued, listen for this, that the US was being exploited by its allies and should stop defending wealthy countries that were not paying their fair share. So he was having these rhetorics about, throwing European allies under the bus, at least in 1987. At least, how many years it is? 97, like 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago. And I think they exploited very cleverly his fear of being ripped off. So they said, probably, or somehow instilled into his mind, that United States were ripped off by Western allies, by European allies, and it is obviously, and the Soviet KGB told him probably that Americans are suckers if they are, not doing anything about that, and allowing these fat Europeans just to, not to just to rely on American security and not paying their fair share in the in the security. This was not an outright attack on NATO, but it echoed long-standing Soviet narratives aimed at weakening Western alliances. The timing raises questions about whether his Moscow trip played a role in his sudden engagement with global politics. However, this remains speculative. Conclusion: a possibility not to be excluded. Intelligence analysis is not the same as law enforcement. It is not about proving a case beyond a reasonable doubt, but rather about assembling pieces of incomplete information and assessing the most likely explanations based on deep knowledge of the subject matter and key players. A favorite expression among analysts is a possibility not to be excluded. And that is where I land on this matter. Musaev's claims are compelling, consistent with other collateral reporting, and fit within a broader pattern of known Soviet intelligence activities. However, they are not conclusive. Even if Trump was recruited in 1987, that does not necessarily mean that he has remained a recruited asset for the past 40 years. Yet it does raise the possibility that his relationship with Russian intelligence figures have left him vulnerable to manipulation, even decades later. One key misconception about espionage is the idea that compromat is the primary tool of recruitment. While compromat can play a role, coerced agents are often unreliable and difficult to control. A much more effective intelligent relationship is one in which the collaborator seeks mutual benefit. And you should read some books from Viktor Suvorov, who is well known for his series of books Icebreaker, where he describes his theory that Stalin was prepared to attack Germany, and was just it so happens that Hitler was able to do it first, to attack first Stalin before Stalin could attack Hitler. But he has quite, because he was a Soviet spy, he was based, I think, in Switzerland, I think. And I think he was based in Zurich. And he then defected to United Kingdom. But in his book, there are a lot of the ways that they were trying to recruit, and almost never compromat was a tool, because they wanted to seduce the targets. They wanted them to be to feel good about that, about all this relationship, to be able to be willing to participate, just as this author says. While compromat can play a role, coerced agents are often unreliable, difficult to control. A much more effective intelligent relationship is one in which the collaborator sees mutual benefit. Trump's rhetoric and actions in recent years, his reluctance to criticize Putin, his efforts to weaken NATO, and his alignment with Russian disinformation campaigns do not suggest someone acting under duress. Instead, they suggest someone who, for his own reasons, has fully embraced the Russian position. Whether or not Trump was recruited in 1987 may ultimately be less important than the fact that today he is aligned with Putin's interests. Whatever the origin of this alignment, its current reality is undeniable. So I think, yeah, this is exactly right. It doesn't matter if he was recruited years ago or he came to this just now. Now he is fully in on the side of Putin, Russia. He is just regurgitating, just telling Russian narratives as if Putin is saying it into his ear. So it doesn't matter if he was recruited. This shameful act that was yesterday when United States voted against the resolution that was proposed by Ukraine and was the standard resolution, almost the same that was voted last year on the last year anniversary of full-out invasion, and they aligned with Russia, with North Korea, with who else? With some other despicable countries, and they took their side yesterday, and this side is on the side of Russia. So they sided with Russia. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. And till next time, Slava Ukraini!